What is the one thing that gets in the way above all other variables for them to be their very best? It is the fear of people's opinions. Our brain has learned that social rejection belong to that same category as physical danger. If you can address that, if you can acknowledge it, if you can work with it, you increase the availability of finding yourself into flow state. The psychological skill is different than the technical and physical skill. And world's best, they don't leave one of those up to chance. And the most powerful people that I've ever met are the ones that they line up their thoughts, their words, and their actions in service of something that is far bigger than them.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Sherry's Notes. Do you know what all the winners have in common? We're talking about Fortune 500 CEOs, Super Bowl winners, Olympic medalists. All they have in common is that they need to train their minds. And when they have trouble, sometimes they turn to one person, and that person is our guest today, Dr. Michael Gervais. Welcome, Michael.
Oh, thank you. What a fun introduction. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Thank you. I read your book, and when we talk about succeeding and having that performance mindset, we usually think in terms of addition. Like, how do I train to have more grit, more focus? But your book talk a little bit more about subtraction. And you talk about a term that I find very interesting is FOPO. We all know what FOMO means, the fear of missing out. Can you explain what FOPO means and why we need to subtract that?
Yeah, that's great. So FOPO, it was actually just for fun. It was like FOPO, fear of people's opinions. But it started with an honest investigation in myself first, and then for the last 25 years working with World's Best, what is the one thing that gets in the way above all other variables for them to be their very best? And what we came to find is that it is the fear of people's opinions. And you're absolutely right when you talk about the subtraction model, because not that this is going to be new information, but just set the frame. Evolution wired us to care deeply about being accepted, being part of the tribe. And a couple 100,000 years ago, getting kicked out of the group or the tribe was a near death sentence. Mm-hmm. So our brain has learned that social rejection belong to that same category as physical danger. Mm. And that wiring, it has not been updated. However, our environment has radically been upgraded and changed. Today, like, you can be evaluated by thousands of strangers in seconds.
Right.
Your reputation can be scored in public metrics, likes, followers. That was never the case when, the brain was first forming its circuitry. And so the same ancient circuitry that once helped us stay alive is now overfiring, in response to all the imagined, for the most part, social threats.
Right. And
this is one of the reasons we're so terrified of presenting on stage, because what's at stake really is the thoughts of other people. Their opinions of us is the most dangerous thing that we often encounter.
So how does that hinder one's performance when we're under immense pressure to make decision? Especially athletes who require deep focus, or let's talk about, someone like a spy like James Bond, or just a CEO, or just everyday mom with emergency situations. When you need to be super focused and super calm, how does FOPO hinder your performance?
The highest performance state, and Alyssa Liu clearly showed that as one of the figure skaters in the most recent Olympics. The highest performance state is when you are completely engrossed and absorbed in the task at hand, where your awareness and your focus and your action are completely fused. Athletes call it the zone. The science is called flow state. And what really is happening is that the athlete is dissolving pressure. Okay, so hold that framing for just a minute. And then what's happening for most people, because our brains are hundreds of thousands of years old, if not much older, is that there's this circuitry that is embedded deep into our survival mechanism, which is to scan the world to see if we're okay in the eyes of others. Do whatever it takes to make sure that you're not being rejected, because that's, like I said, a near-death sentence. And so when you've got this distracted mind and this internal worry, this chatter of mental activity, it is nearly impossible to completely become absorbed with the task at hand. And to do anything masterfully, to do anything at an extremely high level, it requires all of your attention. And that's where the art of performance starts to emerge, let alone the kind of the prowess of high performance, which sits right underneath the art of performance. So it's a function of, can you quiet that narrative? And when you quiet that narrative, you have more available access to flow state or the zone, or musicians call it being in the pocket. And what I'm kind of raising both hands to say is, we all, at some level, unless you're a narcissist, unless you're a sociopath, unless you are like absolutely kind of in this weird realm that you do not absolutely care about other people, for the rest of us healthy people, we do have this biological signal to make sure we're okay in the eyes of others. If you can address that, if you can acknowledge it, if you can work with it, you increase the availability of finding yourself into flow state.
And that might be why so many narcissists are able to succeed. I know you and I both talked to Dr. Ramani about narcissism. To be able to focus on self, sometimes it is a benefit in terms of performing. But I know when you talk about it, there are a lot of threats that are imagined, but there are some threats that are real. And you do see performers, athletes representing their group, especially if they're marginalized or their identity is tied to the role that they play, the team that they play, the country that they play. And so, yes, we do want them to isolate that fear and focus on the task so they can go into that flow state. At the same time, the threat is really real. If you don't perform well, then there are deep consequences that you'll have to deal with. In that type of situation, and as a coach, what can you help with that situation? Because there are imagined threats and then there are real threats. But either way, we want to get them to that place where they can focus. So can you let us know if we truly believe the threats are real?
You're onto something very nuanced and very powerful. There is a difference between real threat and imagined threat, but they are experienced the same way. So it's very important for all of us to know the difference between real danger and imagined danger, real threat and perceived threat. And one of the things that helps mitigate that is your skill level. So, for example, if you and I are in the same room and there's the door flies open and there's an 800-pound gorilla that is staring at the two of us, and you are a world-class gorilla wrestler, okay? You're not going to maybe see that as a threat. You might see that as like, oh, wait, hold on. This is what I love to do. I'm really good at this too. Okay, well, that's a big gorilla, but you know what? This is what I do. And I'm in the corner panicked because I don't have the skills. I don't have the reference points. I don't have the understanding of how to meet the demands of that moment. So this is where traditional coaching tends to focus on making sure you have the skills. But it falls short because for the last 25 years, I've been fortunate to work with world's best. There's one competitor I'm thinking about right now who had 2 gold medals. So for 2 Olympics, she was the best in her sport, nearly the best to ever play the sport. And heading into her 3rd Olympics, she didn't lose her physical skills. She was still winning, with radical margins, far better than everybody else. But she was starting to second guess herself. She was starting to think about herself differently. And her psychological skills were starting to be tested. The margins were getting a little bit closer between her and her competitor. She didn't really like how that felt. She was still winning. But the psychological skill is different than the technical and physical skill. And world's best, they don't leave one of those up to chance. There's only three things we can train: technical skills, physical skills, and mental skills. And that is something that I think the most progressive coaches understand, because they're listening to their athletes saying, I want to be confident. That's not a physical skill. That is a mental skill. How do we build that? And the last thing I'll just add here is that, we call it the high performers trap, and it's the performance-based identity. And a performance-based identity is, I am what I do. And when you say I'm an athlete, or I'm an artist, or I'm an executive, it's as if you have foreclosed or turned off all of the other dimensions of you, so that helps you get good, because there's a lot on the line. When you say I'm an executive or I'm a mom, and that's the identity that you hold, you will put a lot of effort into getting good at that. Okay, that's good. But there's a cost. There's a trap, if you will. And that trap is, each time you go perform or do that thing, as a mom maybe, or as an athlete, your entire identity is at stake. So it's no longer as simple as, let's say, baseball: see the ball, hit the ball, focus all of your attention on that. There's another narrative that's happening underneath, which is, if I miss the ball, I will be rejected. If I miss the ball, I am nothing. If I miss the ball, my future won't work out. It's this cascade of spiraling that takes place inside of us that becomes overwhelming. And that's called a performance-based identity. And it's a trap, because it can get you good, because you want to defend your identity. You want a strong identity. So you invest in skill development, but it becomes this massive trap, because your whole sense of self is on the line. That's why elite athletes and people that do keynote speeches or whatever find themselves anxious the moments before they go do the thing. It's not that the thing is so dangerous. It's because their identity is at risk. And that is the deeper danger.
Right. So would you say, if your identity is not tied to just one thing, one particular skill, would that help? I'm thinking of the old movie Chariots of Fire, where this is not your primary task. I don't remember the specifics of the movie. I believe one of the athletes believe his primary task is to serve God, and that sort of takes the pressure off a little bit. I'm curious if religion or that kind of belief does help, because you do see a lot of world athletes. I won't name any names, but they should be number one, and somehow they choke. They choke every time, and they're just always that close.
Well, if you think about, I'm going to answer your question, but I just want to give you a framing.
Yeah.
Think about a hierarchy for just a minute. There is choking. There is surviving under pressure. There is performing with pressure. There's thriving with pressure. And then there's dissolving pressure. So amongst that stack, it's important, if you find yourself just a bit tighter when, quote unquote, you feel pressure, it's because the way that you are framing the activity. Go back to the gorilla story. If you frame that as, let's say you've trained your whole life wrestling gorillas, right? And you frame it when the door flies open and there's a gorilla, and you say, oh my God, Mike is going to think that he's never seen me do this, and if I don't do well, he's going to think that I'm full of it. Now you've just created pressure. Or you can also frame it another way, which is the gorilla, is in the door, and you go, oh my God, I love this. What a surprise. Mike, hey, go sit in the corner for a minute. I got you. I love doing this. I got you. So now you're framing it as something that's exciting. You are responsible for the way you frame it. And I see this trap, this performance-based identity developing in young athletes, because their early scaffolding of these young kids is that the community around them praises them for their outcomes, praises them for how exceptional they are, or how wonderful it is that, they're playing for this team or scoring what points. And that's also for grades. That's also for social kind of, status. And some studies have found on elite athletes that when you foreclose your identity in adolescence, the person becomes the swimmer or the quarterback or the great student, that what ends up happening is that they no longer have that dimensionality, and literally they lose themselves to this burden that they once loved. And so it is a challenge. That the from to in this case, though, is going from a performance-based identity to a purpose-based identity. And now
Purpose-based.
and so we're not saying have multiple performance-based identities. We're saying, no, get out of that. Be part of something larger. Be part of the community. Recognize your heritage. Recognize that you are part of a collective, and bring that to the activities that you're doing, and have the activities be in service of something far bigger than you. And when people do that, they end up feeling like they know their place better in the world. And there's something really powerful about that type of harmony with autonomy. And I have a deep respect for the cultures that understand how to support, whether it's a large culture like a region of the world or a small sport culture, that figure out how to help the person feel part of something, and that their part in it is important and it matters. And their job is to strain and to get to the edges where the unlocks happen, to be a great teammate and community member, and to hold the standard for themselves and others. And when you get that broth of performance, something changes inside of the individuals and the collective. And that's what we call great teams. But it's a team it's almost transactional to the idea of feeling of part of something that is far bigger than you. And what I'm suggesting is that is what's called a purpose-based identity, that your identity is rooted in something far bigger than you that matters to you, and it's out in front of you. It's something to go work toward.
That's terrific. That's beautiful. There are a couple of things I want to address, because you talk about, we think about Michael Jordan, who was able to thrive under pressure, right? So I think about the games when I still watched basketball when I was younger, watching him able to think clearly and thrive. And you kind of see he's excited by that last minute thrill, the overtime. So that kind of fits in with what you were saying, instead of surviving under pressure or just coping that pressure, changing your mindset and looking at it from a different perspective. And it all of a sudden becomes fun and exciting. And with that, I do also want to talk, especially my audience. We're based in Taiwan, so there are a lot of, Mandarin speaking, Chinese speaking parents and coaches. Is that often we do tie scores, grades, performance to kids' identity. I have a friend who was telling me she's very worried about her daughter because her daughter is always number one in school. And she obviously excels at everything she does. And one time she slipped and she wasn't number one. And that was very upsetting for her. And we understand how that's going to create a challenge for her in the future. But at the same time, we can already see she's, foreclosed her identity at that young age, before the age of 16. She has to be the number one academically. So I do want to encourage parents who are listening to really be mindful of that, because it's sort of over justification. If your kid really enjoys math and gets good score, let's not reward that because he's already passionate or she's already passionate about that subject. And I do see a lot of parents doing over justification. It's like, oh, you're good at it. Okay, if you get even better, I will reward you something. And then once the reward's gone, kids are no longer interested in what originally was their driver or their passion. So I did want to take a chance to remind the parents. Asian, we see that a lot in Asia.
Yeah, well, of course, I can't speak to a culture other than the one I understand the most, but I do understand this principle. And the principle is we all need to be challenged. but first we need to be supported. So
Mm.
the ordering is support, then challenge. And when we feel supported to go for it, when we feel supported to, no matter what the outcome is, the sense that I still matter in somebody else's life, what that paradoxically does, it allows the challenge to be even more intense. So support, then challenge. If you get the reversed order, if you have the order reversing, the challenge becomes anxiety provoking. It becomes overwhelming.
Mm.
And you said something very important, which is about like enjoying doing the thing that you're doing. You know, there is a race to high performance for so many of us, and it's okay. But if you knew what I knew from working with people that are truly the best, single best in the world at what they do, they love what they do.
Mm.
They, there's no way to become exceptional at something over the course of a lifetime and not really love it and not really love learning. So, more than anything, is helping our young people love learning, loving the unlocking, loving the discovery of doing something and trying something that might be the biggest breakthrough in music or whatever. And so it's easy to see like the short-term horizon. Well, if Johnny or whomever studies more right now, which studying is obviously important,
Mhm.
that they get into a better college. Yes, of course. But I think the right way to think about it is that it gives them more options.
Mm.
Now, if they have more options, but they don't love learning and they're exhausted and they don't really even like themselves that much, they feel anxious or depressed or suicidal, or they're using drugs to cope with the pressures that, are coming from performance, we have a real problem on our
Mm.
hands. And it's very, very sad. And it's not just one culture. It is a global pressure that parents feel.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is to make sure you have the right perspective and to
Yeah.
step back, help your child love learning, help them love what it feels like to unlock, help them love how it feels to make mistakes and figure it out. And all of that is kind of the really wonderful broth of high performance.
Yeah. So parents do, adults, I think, really do need to reflect on their own values as well. Because if you have that mindset, it's easy to impose it on your kids, right? You mentioned about finding your purpose. And the recent debate that I see that's quite active on social media in Taiwan is, should you pursue your passion, or should you find a job that you're good at? And this is a constant debate, and I think everyone has different takes. I'm curious what your take is. And the second question is, if we go beyond that to find your purpose, we hear a lot, well, I don't know what my purpose is. How do you begin finding that purpose?
Yeah, it's a really thoughtful question. I'll start with the purpose piece first, and then I'll go to answering the passion trap, if you will.
Yeah.
So, purpose, according to research, there's three legs to the stool of purpose. So, for somebody to have purpose, it means that they have identified something that is important to them. It matters to them.
Hmm.
And the thing about that is nobody can give you purpose. It has to come from you. Okay, so that's one. That is not really available for kids.
Mm.
So we need some discernment and some thinking and some awareness about choices. So the first, though, leg of the stool is that it matters to you.
Hmm.
The second is that it's bigger than you.
Mm.
So you play a small part in this bold ambition, this thing that is larger. And the third is that it's out in front of you. There's something to work toward. Those are the three legs of the stool of purpose. And so how do you help people through that? Is you just talk about it a lot, or you ask them to write about it and think about it. And you do not have to get a neck tattoo or a face tattoo, or you don't have to tattoo anything unless you love tattoos and take them off. But it's a work in progress.
Mm.
And then if it feels overwhelming, which for most people it does, you can niche it down and say, right, well, what is my purpose as a mom? Or what is my purpose for this year? Or what is my purpose for this month? What really matters to me? What's bigger than me? And what am I working toward this month? Or as a role, as a mom, or this, so you can play with the dimensionality of it. And when you as an adult are more clear about what it feels like to be aligned, first clarify with purpose and then aligned with it, you start to model it. And you don't even have to teach it. It's just part of how you think and how you operate. And the most powerful people that I've ever met are the ones that they line up their thoughts, their words, and their actions in service of something that is far bigger than them. So it might look on the surface like their whole life has revolved around getting a gold medal at the Olympics. And then you pull them aside and you say, hey, what's all this for? And they go, oh, no one ever asked me about my purpose. It's because if I do that, then I have this platform to be able to talk about how to help, starving dogs in this part of the world, or building wells in that part of the world, or this is my path to give, a college education to my children, or whatever it might be. So many though haven't done that deeper work. And it just looks like they're working on the surface. But when you've got somebody that's working hard on the surface and they've got that deep work clarified and they're aligned to it, watch out. They do not get moved around. They don't get bullied. They don't get pushed around because they are so strong in their convictions. When somebody says, your purple hair looks stupid, they're like, that doesn't really matter to me. Okay, thank you. Or they say, you can't go do that. Nobody from our town has ever won a gold medal. And they're like, okay, that's good for you. Because they're not allowing the other people's opinions to push them around. They're very clear on their first principles in life.
Right. So having that strong anchor is very important. And I love what you said, that finding your purpose is a work in progress, because so many young people, I think, without a lot of life experience, had hoped that they know what their mission in life is, as if it's something that you're born and you just know, well, I'm going to be an actress one day. But a lot of times it's not that. It's through trial and tribulation that you find out what's not important to you and what is. So I absolutely love what you said about finding your purpose. You're finding it. It's a work in progress, and it may not be lifelong. It could be just for now, for this time being. And
That's right.
That's great as well.
That's exactly it. Amen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for that. But I also did want to share a story of my friend who's extremely extroverted. She breaks out into hives, like her whole skin. She has allergic reaction when she's thrown into parties. And yet her job is to raise funds internationally to help charity organizations, meaning she has to speak different languages and do presentations in front of people. And I had just asked her, how are you able to do this? Because you fear people. And she talked about higher purpose, because her need to want to help these charities trumped her fear. And I think that exemplifies what you had just said. Once you have that anchor, all of that fear sort of just, it has to fade away, because what drives you is so much stronger.
You've nailed it. Your friend really understands it, and she could teach what we are saying just by the way she has designed her life. She doesn't need to even say anything. But there's a person in my life that, has been through more heartbreak and pain than I think most people would ever understand, and has had a very, very traumatic and difficult life. And he leaned over to me one time, and as we were working through something, and he said, Mike, when your purpose is big, you can deal with just about any pain. I thought, oh, that's it. Yeah. So many of us are suffering in life.
Right.
That one of the antidotes to suffering is to be part of something that really matters, that you are going to play a role in, where kind of your life efforts are worthy, matter to other people. And that's not having other people, clap when you walk into the room. That's not other people celebrating you. That's not even other people loving you. It's you having so much love in your heart that you are sharing it with others, or you are sharing it with a passion. And it's the directionality, I think, that is important for us to understand. Is like, it's not about something happening outside of you that changes you. It's the way you work from the inside that ends up changing people outside of you. And that is one of the powers of purpose.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, so we talk about purpose and we talk about passion, loving what you do. What did you think about that debate that's still going on after years? Do you pursue your passion, or do you find something that you're good at first?
Well,
What would you recommend to fresh, people who are graduating this year out of college?
okay, first I want to go after this passion idea. So what most people think is that most people would nod their head when asked the question, do you want to live with passion? Most people are like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah. And then, okay, so then for some reason, the next question is, well, what brings you passion? And somebody says, oh, playing the guitar. Oh, okay. So is that what you want to do? Boy, that'd be great. I'm just not very good at it. So now we have the dilemma. Okay. What's missing here, though, is, do you want to live with passion? People nod their heads and say, yeah. Do you know how to cultivate passion? What do you mean? Do you know how to live with passion? Yeah, when I play the guitar. Yeah, but what about when you're washing dishes? Well, who would want to have passion washing the dishes? Oh, so actually you don't want passion. You want to do things that bring you passion, but you don't really want passion across all of your life. Oh, no, I want to live with passion in everything I'm doing. Are you sure? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so then we need to decouple passion, living with passion, from the one thing or two things that you do that naturally bring passion or naturally open up passion. It is possible. It is possible to have a vitality, a zest, a real energetic way that is not like wild or like weird, but like a grounded energy in everything that you do. Call that passion. There's a fire inside of you. There's a fire inside of you for the conversation, washing the dishes or playing the guitar. Those are people who have mastered life. They can go do anything they want now. They can do the thing that they're naturally pretty good at, and they just have this natural passion towards that. You've got a win-win. They can also go, into an awkward situation and be like, no, I know how to live with passion wherever I am. I don't think it's exclusive. Like, chase the thing you're good at to make money, let's say, or chase the thing you're passionate. I think they're not mutually exclusive. If you understand the mechanics of how to live with that aliveness, then you have the choice to pursue the things that you're actually pretty good at.
Yeah, that's very aligned with Buddhist philosophy,
It
finding a
is.
joy in what you are doing. So as opposed to pursuing something that brings you joy, but just find joy in what you're doing right now. So that's beautiful. And I know we're almost at time, but I do hope you can share with some of my audience just 1, 2 techniques that people can use. Now we understand a lot of threats are perceived. And I love what you wrote in your book about the sweating response. I hadn't heard about that before. When we're nervous and under pressure, we sweat a lot. And this is biologically because so that people can't catch us because we become slippery. I think that's hilarious. Now, we don't need to be slippery now. So now if I know whatever I'm feeling is perceived threat, and I like to calm myself down and focus. Is there anything you can teach us? Just 1 or 2 simple techniques.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's materially important for all of us to invest in, and this is not something you do once or 20 times and you're masterful at it, but it's a lifelong investment, is to increase your awareness of how your thoughts and emotions work. And increase your awareness of how things outside of you are working. And so what am I pointing to? It's the ancient practice of mindfulness, which is to practice being aware, practice focusing on the one thing for an extended period of time so that you become aware of when your mind is drifting away from the one thing or critiquing the one thing or fully distracted in and of itself. And then you have the practice of bringing your attention back. So awareness practices are the foundation for unlocking all of the brilliance that you want to have in life. So that is kind of the foundation. There's 3 ways to practice awareness. One is mindfulness. The second is journaling. And the third is conversations with people of wisdom. All 3 of those together are really, 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 really powerful. One alone is really good. And so I would say, according to laboratory research, 8 minutes is like a minimum effective dose of meditation, if you will. And 20 minutes seems to have a little bit more of a long-lasting effect over time, if you will. And if my first teacher, who taught me meditation about 25 years ago, were hearing me talk about counting your minutes, he would say, "Mike, you haven't learned a thing." But I am practically speaking that you can train your mind to become more aware. And then once you're aware, you have choices that you can make. But if you're not aware, you don't really get to make the choices. You don't have the optionality. So that's one. The second thing that and I don't need to talk about how to meditate. I'm sure you deeply know if you've referenced meditation, and your community probably knows. So I'm just reinforcing one of the best practices for elite athletes and high performers, according to research, and something that's been around for 2,600 years. Okay, meditation. The second is breathing practices. And there's a whole host of different types of breathing practices. There's 2 that I want to highlight. One is called down regulation breathing. And so that helps you become more relaxed after intense moments. And that is that the cadence of breathing is, for every unit inhale that you have double the units on the exhale. So if you breathe in for 5 seconds, you would exhale for 10 seconds. And then if you do that 12 times in a row, according to research, you begin to trip the parasympathetic nervous system, which is a fancy phrase for your rest and digest system in your body. So long exhales. I mean, our grandmothers had it right. Hey, sweetie, take a long exhale. You'll feel better.
Yeah.
So, but that's about 12 in a row. The next thing that I'll highlight, and I'll stop after this, is above and beyond making sure that you've got quality sleep, quality nutrition, that you're exercising on a regular basis in relatively intense ways, is that you are becoming skilled at working with your own thoughts. What does that mean? It is your responsibility to know what thoughts are useful for you and what thoughts no longer serve you. You are in control of the way you speak to yourself about yourself. You are in control of the way you speak to yourself about your future, about your past. So your self-talk becomes a massive tool. And for most people, it is massively unrealized because they haven't done the work to know what thoughts are useful and what thoughts are not. And then gate out the unuseful ones, and have better self-talk for the ones that are useful. Those would be the 3: awareness, breathing, and self-talk.
Love that. Especially self-talk. I do want to address, in our culture, it is not polite to compliment yourself or just highlight what you've done or your achievements. So people do that passively. People still find a way to squeeze that in, but usually it's frowned upon in our society. And so I do feel like when we internalize that kind of talk, oh, I'm not that great. Oh, it's not, I didn't do it. It's not, I can't get credit for that. That's what's accepted in society. But when we internalize that, and that becomes negative self-talk, like, no, that's not me. I didn't do it. But when you've done something wrong, it's very self-critical. Like, gosh, Sherry, that was a dumb thing to say. And so I love what you had mentioned, the way we speak to ourselves.
And Sherry, I'm saying, is it useful for you?
Yeah.
There's no critique for me about how or what the nature of your self-talk is, but it is important to recognize that the way that you speak to yourself does influence the emotions that you feel.
Right.
And so if you want to cultivate emotions that help you go after big challenges or step into challenging situations with some confidence, it does involve speaking to yourself in a way privately that builds your sense of capabilities and backs yourself up, if you will. And
Right.
so, arrogance is a problem. Like nobody likes the ignorant and the arrogant. That's the pompous kind of cockiness that can come from somebody who's trying to prove that they're special.
Right.
It is unbecoming. But there's a quietness and confidence, which is, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
And then if I were to challenge my own thinking, well, what makes you believe you can do that? Well, I've done this well, and I did that well, and I did this thing pretty good, and like I've done a lot of hard things, and that looks pretty hard, and I've trained pretty hard. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
So that is not like cocky or arrogant. That's like useful thinking
Yeah.
to become the person that you want to be.
Absolutely. I think doing that objective inventory and giving yourself credit and compassion and say, look how far I've come instead of look how far I still need to go. And I think you're absolutely right. There's a fine line between I got this, I'm confident I can do this, that and being, pompous and arrogant, say, "Oh, I got this,
Yeah,
it's
right.
all
Yeah, that's
me."
right.
So finding that line and finding, I love what you said, does it serve you?
That's
The
right.
way you talk to yourself, is it helping? If saying, Sherry, you're so stupid, that's not helping me, then that shouldn't be the way I talk to myself. Rather than I made a mistake, what can I learn from it? So I love that growth mindset, if you will.
Yeah. And Sherry,
That's really helpful.
real quick before we keep going, is that, think about the person in your life that really supports and challenges you.
Hmm.
The person that really sees something special in you. And somehow they have a way of conveying that to you. Those people are awesome to be around. They make you feel like you can really go for it. You can do special things in your life. And you don't even have to do special things because they just think you are special.
Mm.
That if you could just use that person's narrative and bring it into your own way of being more often, that might be a nice proxy to build
Right.
from. Yeah.
Right, right. And I think most people are lucky to have someone like that in their lives. And if they don't, I still think you can find that power from within.
Amen.
It's
Yes.
may just be a little bit harder. Anyway, so thank you. I know you're at time. Is there
Thank you.
anything that you need to add or you feel like we've missed?
No, I'm encouraged by this conversation because it sounds like you and your community are really trying to understand how to unlock the brilliance that is already inside of you and your community members. And I would say one of the things that there's two principles. One is I believe everything you need is already inside of you,
Mm,
and it is your job to open the aperture so that that brilliance comes out. And it doesn't mean that, you have all the answers. It just means that everything is already in there. And so just keep being a great learner on how to work from the inside out. That's one principle. And the second is we need people to be great teammates in our lives, great partners. And so we give what we have. If you are stressed out, if you are fatigued, if you are intolerant, if you are overwhelmed, that is what you give. If you are joyful, if you are optimistic, if you are excited about the future, if you are confident that you can go through hard times together, that's what you give.
mm,
And so I'm just saying right now in this very complicated world that we're living, your community really does need to stand up for the people in their lives that are struggling.
mm.
And if you are struggling yourself, remember everything you need is already inside you. And so sharing that with other people, writing it out, all of us will go through traumas at some point in our lives. You're not alone. You are not alone in this journey. And there's so much more in front of us. So keep pursuing how to unlock the brilliance that's already inside you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. And Mike,
Yes.
your new book, The first rule of mastery is selling well in Taiwan. So we have the link below. And you also have your own podcast, which is called Finding Mastery. If anyone liked our conversation, please also follow Mike on his podcast. Thank you so much again, Mike, for coming on my show.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you.